Hey guys, how's it going? This is Alpha Seagull. So I made a tier list of all the armor in Grounded, and I put it on Reddit, and there seems to have been a lot of feedback of various sorts from various people discussing what, what's good and what's bad. Now, I decided I want to not only make a video explaining the reason for all these... My scroll wheel is stuck. What the heck? I don't know why it's... Dude, my scrolls. Anyway, so I decided I want to make a video not only explaining why everything's in this tier, but I also decided to make a couple more tier lists of the weapons and the mutations. Now, I'm not going to make it one by one. I already prepared the tier lists here. If you want to pause the video and look at them, you can. But if you do that, you're not going to know everything that I have to say about each thing in each tier. So be sure to watch the whole video before you make judgments. Now, first, I'm going to go over the armor. Now, keep in mind, and I cannot stress this enough, I probably should have clarified this in my Reddit post. This is based on late game use. This is not based on early game. This is not based on how quickly you can get it, how easy it is to make. This is solely based on if you have essentially done almost everything in the game, you have access to all of these armor sets, this is the order that you want them in. That's just generally how it works. And second thing, that this also goes for the other two tier lists as well, the mutation tier list and for the weapons tier list. This all goes for actual end game strategies, right? Now, I mean, obviously, these three weapons are essential, but you're only gonna be using them in early game. So what's the point? So that's why they're in D tier. That stuff like that, right? Set being really good in early game does not mean anything. But I will say that even if it wasn't based on this, the tiers wouldn't change much. Now, second thing, I'm judging them based on overall potential, not necessarily usefulness. Now, obviously usefulness is a factor, but this is overall potential. Like, if you use this armor to its maximum possible potential, how does it compare with every other armor used to its maximum possible potential, right? So, sure, the grub armor gives you plenty of stamina, and you can get a lot of use out of that, but do you need it? Like, is it actually going to help you in any way that none of these other armors can? And the answer is no, right? So to start things off, I'm going to start with S tier. Now, keep in mind these aren't ordered either. Like, every tier list is its own tier, but generally everything, it's just set random. I probably could order these right now, and in that case, I would probably put them... in this order. This would probably be the ordered version of the tier list. Though the order doesn't really matter too much. See, a lot of the thing is, pretty much every piece of armor, gear, mutations, anything in general that you use in this game comes down to playstyle, right? So there's nothing that's objectively better than others. Obviously, everything's going to have a situation where it's more useful than everything else, right? The way I'm judging these is how often are you actually going to need that armor, right? How often does that armor help you in a noticeable, meaningful way, right? So most of the arguments that I've had about this were regarding these two armor sets in particular. The Red Ant armor and the Aphid slippers, right? So a lot of people think these are too low because Aphid slippers gives you movement speed, and it's the only thing in the game that gives you movement speed. And Red Ant armor not only gives you more hauling strength, so you can haul 8 stems or planks instead of 5, but it also makes you invisible to ants, which makes it easier to get quartzite in the Red Ant Hill and the Old Ant Hill. Now, I want to say that I'm aware of these factors, and it doesn't change anything. Now, first of all, I want to say I wasn't always aware about the Aphid Slippers, because the thing is, I've put them on in a game before. But when I actually ran around with them, I didn't notice a difference. Turns out there is one. I ran a couple tests. I ran alongside the construction tape over by the grill, and I just ran straight from one end of the construction tape to the other. And without the Aphid Slippers, it took me about 1 minute and 56 seconds, while with the Aphid Slippers, it took me about 1 minute and 37 seconds. Now, that's just about a 20% difference, which implies that, generally speaking, Aphid Slippers make you 20% faster, which is really cool, but how much does this actually help you? Now, there's only 2 situations where I would think that's actually useful, one of which is if you're running from an enemy. But in those cases, you can generally run from everything. The only thing that you might have a harder time running from is wolf spiders. And, you know, you kind of can't run away from them with or without Aphid Slippers. So there's no real point to doing that. Plus, if we're talking about true potential, do you really need to be running away from wolf spiders? Like, especially late game, if you're running like any one of these armor sets, you're probably also working with an antlion sword, so you don't have to run away from them in the first place. You can just kind of four-shot them. Easy enough. Now, as for the red ant armor, the fact that you can get easy quartzite out of this is the only reason why it's in C tier. Otherwise, it would be in D tier along with everything else. However, the reason why it's not any higher, like in B or A tier or anything like that, is because that's its only purpose. And even then, it's not even unique. I can put on Ladybug Armor, put on a mosquito needle, and I can just lay waste to the entire red ant hill. Sure, it would be less convenient for me to fight all those enemies, but this isn't about what armor makes things more convenient. It's about what armor is actually genuinely useful. So in actual genuine usefulness, you don't need this armor. You just don't. You don't need this armor or anything else. There's nothing you could possibly need it for. Wait, no. Because at the end of the day, any one of these armors can replace any one of them, and you won't even care. Now, all that being said, let's go over why everything belongs in every tier. Right, so Koi Scale Armor is definitely a weird one to put in S tier, but there's an actual reason for it. Since I'm judging these on overall potential, I have to consider all possible playstyles, including a playstyle where you parry basically 95% or more of your attacks. And in a situation like that, defense doesn't matter. Armor in general doesn't matter. So the only actual benefits that you can get from an armor is something like damage, something, you know, that's an outside buff that doesn't affect your defense. And in this specific circumstance, Koi Scale Armor gives by far the best buff. So it not only increases your parry window with every piece of the armor, but the set bonus makes it to where enemies take more damage after you parry them. This effect is not only more powerful than the eye patch, but it's also just one of the only attack boosting armor sets in the game. And obviously, if you're really good at parrying, you're always going to have this buff active, therefore it's like a permanent attack buff. And again, if you're landing your parries this often, this is the only armor set you want. And on top of all that, it does still have decent defense in case you occasionally miss a parry. Second thing here, you have the Antlion set. You can think of it like a medium, a happy, healthy medium between the Crusty Roly-Poly set and the Spider Armor set. See, the Spider Armor set, it doesn't actually have that much defense, but it does do everything in terms of stamina. You can play really aggressively and really offensively using the Spider Armor set just because you can attack more times. And that's why a lot of people regard this as the best armor set, even though I personally don't believe that's the case. But regardless of what I believe or don't believe, you can't deny the playstyle works, and this is considering all playstyles, so this is in fact a reasonable thing to put in S tier. So the Roly-Poly armor, it's all for tanks. It's all for just defending, blocking. It's for generally doing anything possible to just take the smallest amount of damage as possible. Some people believe that Ladybug Armor is better for tanking thanks to its increased block defense and the health regen you get every time you block, but I still feel like Roly-Poly is just better. Like, smoothies can heal you, so if you really need healing, you can use smoothies. And I feel like you only really need more block defense if you can't parry. And again, this is considering max potential, so parrying is going to have to be involved. Now, again, the Antlion set is like a happy medium between these two. It's considered a light armor set, so it does give you more stamina regen, similar to the Spider Armor, but it doesn't have the set bonus that increases a little bit further. However, it does give you the same defense as the Ladybug Armor, despite being light armor, which is pretty good. So it's like a happy medium between the rock hard defense of the Roly-Poly Armor versus the crazy stamina of the Spider Armor. And that being said, it also has the added bonus of being the most powerful armor set when it comes to shooting arrows. Its set bonus gives you a massive boost to bow shot speed. So when you stack this with things like Coup de Grace or like Mom Jeans, you can get crazy amounts of bow damage with this thing alone. So that's it for the S tier. Let's move on to A tier. The Ladybug Armor, if you've used this, you probably know why it's an A tier. It is just the best set for tanking right under Krusty Roly-Poly Armor. So this is if you want to block. If you don't like parrying, but you really like blocking, this is by far the best armor to use because it increases your block strength, it increases your defense by a crazy amount, gives you health regen, it gives you a lot of things, and it's just really an essential armor for the mid game. Now, Red Ant Armor, there's only one reason why it's here. That's because it has the same defense as the Ladybug Armor. Even though it's not quite as good, it's still good enough to be a whole tier higher than these two. Now, its set bonus is Thorns, which honestly, I don't know how much damage it does, but it's probably not enough. Now, the regular armor bonus gives you more stun for each attack, but odds are if you're using the Salt Morningstar, you're not worried about stun anyway. And if you're using any other weapon, you probably don't care about stunning your opponent. Now you got the Eye Patch. Eye Patch is honestly not that useful, but again, if you're parrying like a god, this is probably the best thing to use. Because again, it just gives you more damage output, similar to the Koi Scale Armor, but not as good, and that's why it's an A tier, but this is its only purpose. If you're not a god at parrying, you're probably never going to use this, and I don't blame you. Same goes with Marksman Cap. It's just Eye Patch, but for arrows. And it's also, again, outclassed by Antlion Armor. But both of these are really good if you're just not taking any damage. Now, B Armor is a bit of a niche pick. It has the same defense as the Spider Armor, but it doesn't really have any super useful bonuses on the armor. It gives you more stun on your bow shots, and it also gives you an effect called Pollen Shot, which apparently reduces the movement speed of whatever you hit, and I suppose it can be pretty good when you stack it with things like Coup de Grace and Sharpshooter, but honestly, it's like you can just use Antlion Armor and get the same effect, if not better, so there's no real reason to put it above B tier. Now, Acorn Armor is here for two reasons. It's got the best defense out of all the early game armor, but it also increases your HP, which has more of an effect than you think. It is also, in fact, the only armor set that makes you take less damage from poison, since poison does a fixed amount of damage per tick, and this increases your health. That being said, outside of that, it's nothing special. Odds are if you're using late game stuff, you're not going to even worry about using this. And that's why it lands in B tier. Now, Red Ant Armor, we've already gone over this. The only really useful thing it does is it makes Quartzite easier to get. Convenience doesn't land it in B tier. Convenience doesn't land it in A tier or S tier. Now, if you're building with this, I can understand, but two things about building. For one, you can move a full pallet around with just by pressing the F key. And sure, you can move a full pallet around while carrying 8 stems, but that only increases your total carrying capacity each trip by 3. I don't think you guys realize that a stem pallet can carry like 21 stems. So this means you're going from 26 stems per trip to 29 stems per trip. That is like a 10% difference. So unless you're building something that literally takes 300 stems to make, you're not even going to save yourself one full trip. So yes, in the long run, if you're building a ton, yes, it can make a small difference. But holy heck, do you have to do a lot for it to make that difference? In other words, unless you're Rotten Piece and you're literally building to the window in the house, you're probably not going to get an actual use out of these. I hate to burst your bubble, but that's just the truth. So the only useful thing is, again, the convenience of not having to fight the weak-ass ants in the red anthill. Now, finally, we reach D tier. So first piece is going to be the Aphid Slippers, and literally all it does is give you more movement speed, which is kind of useful. It's 20%. It's not going to realistically help you run from anything. It's just going to get you places slightly faster, which I suppose is useful if you're really worried about losing 20 seconds when walking all the way across the map, but it's just, there's no real reason to put this on. If it gets deleted from the game next update, I wouldn't even notice, right? I mean, obviously it won't get deleted next update, or in general, but it's still not like a super noticeable difference. If it was like maybe 50%, I could get it, right? I'd be like, okay, that'll help you run from a wolf spider, that'll help you actually, traverse way faster and actually be useful. But, dude, 20% don't do nothing, man. Right, so now we're moving on to Grub Armor. Think of Grub Armor like a glass cannon version of Spider Armor. It gives you more max stamina, and it also decreases the stamina cost of attacking, which is basically the same thing Spider Armor does, but better, and its defense is also garbage. I feel like realistically, there's no real reason to use this over Spider Armor unless you're like so good at parrying that you're not worried about damage. And if you're that good at parrying, Parry Master exists. You can just use Parry Master. If you're that good at parrying, you don't need either one of these armor sets. So there's no purpose in placing this anywhere but D tier, because it's useless, frankly. Now, Clover Armor is pretty alright early game for one reason, and that's because it makes your vitals decrease slower. It makes you take longer to get hungry and get thirsty, which helps if you're terrible at the game and you just started. But again, this is a late game tier list, plus that's not really enough to put it over something like Acorn Armor, because if you're that new to the game, odds are you're not really worried about your hunger and thirst, you're worried about running into a wolf spider, and this is going to help you infinitely more than this. Again, just D tier for a reason. Now, the Aphid Hat does one whole thing, gives you hyper stamina, which is this guy's passive bonus, like the set bonus, and there's just not very much reason for it. Now, the Broodmother Mask, this is hilarious. This is actually hilarious, because despite being the hardest armor set to get in the game, because despite all of these different things, the only thing that requires you to beat a boss is this thing right here. Despite being the hardest armor piece to get in the game, it's also the most useless. Isn't that ironic? That's right, I put it below Aphid Slippers, below Grub, below this. I would take any one of these over this, because this does one whole thing, and it gives you poison. So every time you attack, it has a chance to poison it, similar to the Wolf Spider Dagger. That being said, I'm not sure if you ever used poison in this game, but it's friggin' useless. It does nothing. It does like 2 HP, like every half a second or so. It does like a pixel of their health. Now, I actually know why this is the case, because poison actually works very differently between players and enemies. If you ever looked at another player in Grounded, you'll notice that they also have a health bar, but their health bar is usually pretty small. It's usually like slightly more than one of those little like segments, the little bars that you see on enemies. It's like one segment and like a little smidget, above that. And from what I understand, those health bars are the same across every enemy. So an enemy with more bars is going to have more health. Now, their defense can widely range, their resistances can widely range, but generally speaking, that health bar means, but generally speaking, that little bar of health represents the same kind of bar of health that is on your health. That's why when a wolf spider poisons you, it almost kills you. Keyword, almost kills you. Keep in mind, if you have only like 1 bar of health, that means 1 poison proc would also barely do that 1 bar of health to an actual enemy. And a lot of enemies have more than 1 bar of health. Some of them have like 10. And that's why poison is so disgustingly weak against them, because they just don't take very much damage from it. Even though the poison itself is dealing the same damage, quote unquote, it's not dealing the same percentage damage of their health because they just have way more health than you do. Yeah, so this applies to every aspect of poison, but generally like the wolf spider dagger, the assassin mutation, and the broodmother mask, generally not very good. The poison just doesn't do very much damage. I really wish they can buff poison in the next update. My suggestion is for them to leave the poison damage exactly where it is, right? But they should allow it to stack on itself, like up to 10 times or something. Because if it can stack on itself, then you can build an entire setup around dealing as many of these poison stacks as you can. And therefore, all you have to do is attack an enemy a bunch of times and then just wait for it to die. Now, I think obviously it should cap at some point. I don't know where the cap should be exactly, but somewhere. Because I feel like if you get it to cap too high, then people will be able to like kill broodmother with it, right? But as long as you cap it at like less than 10 somewhere, I think people can do a lot of damage with it while still not dealing so much damage that they're not like doing crazy things with it. Because honestly, out of all the tier 2 weapons, I feel like wolf spider dagger is the most useless one. So anyway, that concludes my armor tier list. It looks like this video has gone on way longer than it was supposed to be. My recording says 35 minutes. Obviously, I messed up some lines, so I'm probably going to have to edit a lot of it out. But that's at least got to be a 10-minute long video. So I don't want to bore you guys with like a 30-minute long video when all you're here for is the armor. So I'm going to upload these in parts. This is going to be the armor tier list. I'm going to have the other 2. I should upload them basically back to back. I'm going to try to. And hopefully you'll be able to just watch all of them. So anyway, I'll see you guys later. See you in the next video. Bye.